Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you the top 10 best OG travel tames. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. In at number 10, I've decided to put the Ichthyosaurus, as I find this is a really valuable travel tame. It is so versatile in how it went around the space in 2015 Arc times, and it really was innovative in the way that it added the passive taming ability, which is one which we all very much know and love to this day, and it was the one to innovate it. I'm confident it was the first one, and it was a really fast underwater tame. All of your underwater traveling needs of the OG era of Arc were kept fully under control. There was no issues with traveling these things around anywhere. They could get from A to B insanely quickly, very easy to tame as well, and you know, they would spawn in some quite nice areas as well, so definitely a OG travel tame. Next up, we have got the Rex, and undoubtedly it was still a good travel mount for me. When I was going on quite a long journey, I would actually bring the Rex along with me. It might sound a little bit stupid to you, but this really did just assist me in that sense of traveling, as I felt I had a lot of support to go with me, and that nothing really could face me when I was on a Rex. And that does apply to, I think, one other creature later on in this list as well. Just, you know, the Rex could get from A to B reasonably quickly. It wasn't the fastest, but its stamina didn't feel awful at all when it came out. I don't know why it feels actually quite bad now, and it felt like, yeah, that's a reasonable speed for this creature to go at. And it was just the way that it would go, and then it did the thing, and it did what I needed it to do, and it attacked anything that I needed it to attack, and I survived all of my journeys going on with a Rex. I wouldn't take it underwater, obviously. I didn't. They're really bad swimmers, but anywhere else, it's definitely fine. Next up, I've decided to put the Baryonyx, as although this was a bit of a later one, so it doesn't quite fit into the OG as much as some of the others on the list because it wasn't a release tame, I find it is still very deserving, as its caving travel was something which was great, really. The ability to traverse through caves, but also it could travel through mountains, through water, and through all of that as well. It was a great all-rounder. You don't really say traveling through caves in Arc, but it did add to the element of travel. You could travel to the caves really easily and then just go in them and traverse all of them really easy, so you could say traversal tame in that sense. But you know, still it sticks to the travel taming niche. It is a very useful creature, very easy to tame as well. It could jump around and it had a lot of speed on it, and still is a very great carnivore to have in your roster if you haven't actually tamed one already. Definitely worth it. I feel like this creature sort of gets discounted when it comes to the OG traveling tames, and I know it's kind of a little bit far-fetched further because you have to wait for the Snowbound to be released, but that's the same time frame as when the Baryonyx was out, because I'm pretty sure it's roughly when the Swamps and Redwoods and stuff came out. And the Megalosaurus was just really that creature where you could get around with a lot of speed on this thing. I know I've got the female one here because it was kind of meant for a worst Arc Tames video, but still the male one would be the one that we usually tend to just look so much more impressive actually generally as well because of those horns. But you really could get a lot of speed on them, and that made them very effective and useful mounts that I would use all over the place all the time, and they would just get me everywhere really quickly. Yes, they didn't do a heck of a lot of damage, but they could jump around and they could do all of that, and they could get you from A to B quickly, and they were easy to tame, so even if they did die, they were quite easily replaceable. The Spino is sort of the upgrade to the Rex for me when it comes to a traveling mount. It really does have everything going for it in terms of that. Compared to the Rex, it is faster mobility. It obviously can travel underwater, which the Rex really is terrible at, and on top of that, it is just generally a more mobile creature. The only real difficulty is they're a bit rarer to find around the place, and you know, you might have some difficulty taming because they're a lot more mobile. It's less easy to trap, you could say, but I really find that that's not too much of an issue when you're dealing with a creature like this. It is totally fine, and you'll have no real issues whatsoever. They are great tames, and you can do a heck of a lot with them, and you will definitely enjoy having one as a travel mount, and I definitely did back then, and it really was something which I could highly respect at the time, and I still highly respect to this day. Really, really great tames for traveling. In number 5, we've got the Thyla, and I found this really did make a huge difference, but I'm having to knock it back a bit from the OG scale because of it being later on. But it really did sort of change the traveling game for a huge amount, and it really is a great traveling mount still to this day, and I love it for all of its versatile traveling abilities. It has a lot of speed, it can get around with relative ease, and you'll really find no issue with getting anywhere with this thing apart from underwater areas, which is the only place where it really lacks. They could also deal quite a lot of damage too, so the protection was definitely there when it came to these creatures. You definitely wouldn't feel like you couldn't be protected under these circumstances with a creature like this. They did everything that you needed for them, and it sort of made the Rex a little bit obsolete for that traveling need, as they were faster and they still did tons of damage for me. Next up, I've decided to put the Raptor, as I find this is just generally a really useful tame in my opinion. I feel like it does everything that you really need it to do when it comes to travel. It has been around since the game has been released, so it definitely falls into the OG stages, and it could pack a lot of speed, a lot of punch, and generally just did very well in terms of traveling. And again, they were quite easily replaceable, like the Megalosaurus, which really did aid them, and on top of that they could do quite a hefty amount of damage too. They really did actually excel in the damage to size ratio, like you could have Carnos and things like that, and they're actually a quite nice honorable mention, so I'll give them one there. But the Raptor just seems to get a lot more oomph when it came to the traveling of creatures and just generally yourself as well. It was a high tier traveling creature to say the least, and that is definitely why it is deserving of this spot on the list. In number 3, I've decided to put the Quetzal, as although this was a little bit of a later addition in 2015, it has come before the Baryonyx, the Thyla, and the Megalosaurus, and it was just such a game changer to the traveling just spectrum on a whole. And obviously you could level up that speed too, you could build a base on the back of these things, and they really did an awful lot when it came to traveling around the place. They obviously weren't the fastest when you first got them, but the fact that they had tons of stamina and weight meant you could carry metal all across the map with these things, and tons of it too, without the risk of being encumbered, which actually the next creature on the list has a little bit of an issue with. But still, I would consider it a better OG Arc travel mount, as it's still very useful to this day and a very respected flyer. But this obviously still is as well, just maybe not quite to the same degree, but it really did hit hard, make a difference, so it deserves to be in the number 3 spot. So as I was saying, in number 2 we've got the Pteranodon. This is the creature that I was alluding to. It is probably the first flyer that you'll tame in Arc, and definitely for all the OGs out there, it was your first flyer that you tame. Well, actually in the number 1 spot is a different flyer, which is definitely a lot more preferable and in my opinion better, but we'll get onto that when we get onto it. But this creature was an incredibly fast, agile flyer that was relatively easy to tame. There wasn't a lot of real difficulty. The fact that you could use a bowler really did aid in the taming of this thing, as traps weren't really widely used when the game first released. There wasn't all of that infrastructure built in. It was simply, you know, you do just bowler the thing and do that, or if it wasn't able to be bowlered, then you would just run after it and keep tranking it, or like stand on top of a cliff or something like that. They were the strategies used, not really traps. But yes, relatively easy to tame, apart from the saddle was a bit of a pain to craft, but it really is deserving of the spot. And in number 1, we've got the RG, and I just find this is the best OG travel mount for just a few reasons. It has a lot more weight than the Pteranodon. It has in some ways a lot more, actually it has a lot more stamina than the Pteranodon, and if you leveled it, you could still get it to the same amount of speed as a Pteranodon and really have a lot of agility on this thing. Not to mention that they could pick up more creatures as well, and I'm not sure if they had this at the time, but their saddle obviously now acts as a portable smithy. But again, not too sure if they had that at the time, but they still had all of those other features. Also, not sure if they had weight reduction at the time, but they were definitely far better for getting metal, crystal, obsidian, those kind of things. Because metal, especially, actually, really, really important game resource, and the fact that you could get it so easily and efficiently with this thing and travel it back to your base. With the Pteranodon, that was an absolute pain, and you could barely gather any of it. You might as well just bring a land mount, whereas this thing, it still definitely worked effectively. The top 10 best early Arc Tames. In at number 10, I've decided to put the Rex, as I find this is generally a very admirable creature to have in any given scenario, and it's been in the game for just such a long while. It's been in the game since it's been released, so it's almost been in the game for 9 years now. It's a lot of games in one sentence, isn't it? But either way, this is the creature which would get you through all your bosses. This is the creature that you would look up to, because you're like, come on, we'd have to get yourself a Rex, because the Rex is, or at least one of the gold creatures that you'd be going for in the early stages of Arc, and it really still does stand up to that to some regards today, although it has lost a little bit of its popularity with ease of taming and other creatures coming out, which you might just say are simply better. But there were some other good options at the time. Obviously things like UTs and all of that didn't exist at all back then, and you know, that's a 2017 creature, which is far too late for this list. I'm pretty sure all the creatures on this list are 2015, but there might be a few that maybe just peek into the 2016 era. Next up, we have got the Quets. As I found when this dropped, still in 2015, at least when I checked the dates the last time, it was still 2015, and it really does hold up as being a really great Arc Tame, and it did kind of shake the scales a little bit when it released. Nothing really like it had been released before, and that's why it really stands so well as a creature. Like, look at this thing. It is a flying animal in which that you can put a platform saddle on the back of it. You could build your own base on the back of this thing. That was just so mind-blowing at the time, and it really deserves a place on this list for that for me. But due to it just being a little bit later on, and then also a nerf quite soon after, I do have to demote it quite a lot. And there are just some other creatures which I thought were a lot more exciting, and this concept was definitely very exciting to me, but it didn't really grip me the most. But I still have to put it in here, as it did make a lot of impact to a lot of Arc players. But I rarely used this thing at the time, and I rarely use this thing now, and I rarely have. I'm sure we all know the Dimorphodon. This actually made a massive impact on me when this was first released into the game. I was like, wait, what? This tiny thing, and it can just do so much damage and attack creatures. And I used this all the time. I would have like a whole big massive pack of Deinonychus behind me, and then boom, like that, they would all go in on those creatures. And yes, I definitely lost a few in my time, but I really did enjoy using these creatures. A very nice, neat addition, and still a 2015 Arc Tame. In at number 7, we have got the Ichthyosaurus, and this really did captivate me as someone who enjoyed the Arc Ocean at the time, and I maybe know that's not the best thing, especially for a beginner, to look out to, because, you know, the Arc Ocean is a very hostile place, but back then there really wasn't all too much in it and to it, and you didn't get, obviously, those birds, I can't remember the name of them now, that would steal all your stuff. Not sure when the jellyfish and electric eels were added, but you did have like plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, megalodons, and obviously the Ichthyosaurus when it was added. At least I'm pretty sure it wasn't around once the game was released, but still a 2015 creature nonetheless, I'm sure of. This was the first creature, as long as I'm right, to include the passive tame, and that added a lot to the sense of the game, and it was a really cool ability, and I still remember it to this day. The passive taming ability, or not really ability but method, was a nice thing to have, and it really felt like the game was evolving, pun intended, because obviously the title was evolved in it, and it was a nice step in the right direction for us, and we really enjoyed this creature. And I say we because everyone that I know when this came out was really excited about this creature. It was a fast, agile underwater mount that could be tamed really easily, and it offered a lot of support with underwater exploration. very good early tame. Speaking of the Megalodon, I've decided to put on this list as well, as I really did love this creature. This was the first underwater mount I ever tamed. Named it Bruce, obviously, because you've got to name it Bruce. The shark in Jaws was called Bruce, so you've got to name all your sharks Bruce. At least that's the way that I look at it. What's your name for your Megalodons, actually? Because I want to know. Comment that down below in the description, or in the comments, actually. You can't comment in the description. Don't know why I said that, but yeah, comment that down below. Would you name your Megalodons, or do you have any funny or interesting names for any of your creatures? As I have a couple, I've probably hinted a few of them in the videos, but I want to know what yours are, because I know people that have loads of weird names for creatures. I'll give you one right now. The Titanoboa, no Titanoboa, it's a danger noodle. Always, that was one of my favourites. The Megalodon has since seen a TLC though, since its release, and now it does the bleed ability, but I still really loved it back then. I didn't even know what a bleed ability was back in those days. As far as I'm concerned, that wasn't in the game at all, apart from maybe the Giga had it when it released, something like that, but that might have been a later edition as well. The Giga was also later on the list, by the way, but let's continue. Now, I'm sure we all know what our first flight was, and in number 5, I've decided to put the Pteranodon slap bang in the middle, because I feel like it deserves this spot on the list. It will be your first flyer in Ark. At least it was the first flyer in Ark that you would be taming back in the day, as, to be honest, pretty much everyone was playing on the official rates, really, unless you were playing single player. I think there was still that 2.5 extra multiplier since the game had been released. Either way, not too sure. The grind was definitely on back in those days, though, and you'd have to grind a lot to even get yourself a Pteranodon, let alone an RG, but we'll get onto that later in the list as well, by the way. And this was just pretty much your only first flyer that you'd be getting. You would bowler it or trap it in some way, and then after that you would knock it out, and then boom, you get that saddle. And that chitin keratin was the hardest part getting this thing, probably, at least in my opinion. Obviously getting to the level of the saddle was just a tremendous exercise to get to at the time, as well as getting like 35 or 40 I think it was, because they grouped levels and 5s and 10s really in those stages of the game. Like you get loads of stuff at level 25, and then you get loads of stuff at level 30. Kind of glad they changed it, because you get stuff at all different levels, and obviously it's a lot more organized now. Did you prefer the old system? Do you prefer the new system? Give me your take on that, because I'm definitely a very new system for Ark stuff, but you know, your preference might be the old stuff if that's your thing. Would you rather just get loads of stuff? Actually, let me rephrase this. Would you rather get loads of stuff at level 25, or get stuff at level 21, 22, 23, 24 and 25 just as a collective? Or would you rather just get everything at 20 and then 25? Would that be better for you, or would that not be better for you? Comment that down below, because I'm inquisitive. Continuing on, I have decided to put the Spinosaurus, as I really did look up to this creature in my early stages of Ark. You might think, well, the Rex is that go-to all-time creature where it's like, you know, the Rex is my goal tame, that is the only creature I'm going to go for. Why possibly would I go for anything else? Well, the Spino was really one of my go-tos back in the day. It just seemed bigger and scarier and able to do more damage, and just a beefier creature. It really just was one of those tames where I was like, I really do love it for all of its attributes, and I did definitely enjoy it as an Ark creature. To have this thing on your side was absolutely insane. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and when I first tamed one, I was on top of the world. I couldn't care less about my Rexes. Obviously I still kept care of them, but the Spino was the new business in town. It could just do everything that I needed it to. It was a really great underwater tame as well, so I felt the Ichthyosaurus and Megalodon were a little bit more obsolete, although I still did use them quite a lot, as you know, you could get around still pretty easily with those. And you know, I had that kind of underwater base setup that Squid had in his old Ark videos from back in the day as well. I did actually find that to be quite nice for me, actually. But the Spino still did kind of replace a lot of creatures for me in a way, or at least take a lot of the attention away from them, you could say. And again, this creature has had a lot of TLC mainly just actually the form of one TLC since it's been released, a model change as well on top of all of that, and it really is for the better. It is a much better creature now than it was back in 2015, but still I really did love it, and it was a really great early addition to Arc, and I'm pretty sure it was definitely, actually I'm like definitely confident that it released with the game. In number 3 we've got the Carno, and I just love this creature to death back in the day. I really did just sort of need one of these things. I was basically just completely reliant on having a creature like the Carno for me. It was a go-to of mine, and it still is a go-to of mine. It is held to the test of time, and I really do love it as a creature that came out in the very early stages of Arc. Again, very confident that this was just released with the game. It has also had a lot of TLC too, in the form of one TLC update, where now it's got the bleed ability, and it just generally is a bit more well-rounded. I'm not sure if it's had a model update. It definitely had a texture update at some point midway through 2015, maybe going into 2016 at that point, and that was actually quite exciting to see. But the Carno really did just excite me as a creature, because I had loads of raptors at the time, but they kept getting killed, and it really wasn't something which I wanted to keep taming. And I saw the Carno and I was like, right, I'll get one of those. Looked at where the shadow level was, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't, but I was like, no, I'll still get one. And then it followed me around everywhere once I obtained one, of course, and I would take it on metal runs and all of that, and just let it attack some things, get its level up, because that's kind of just what I did to level up creatures back then. You know, I just take them around with me and just tell it to kill things. It really did also just make my life a whole lot easier as well, which just added to the overall benefit of this creature and how much I loved it. And then when I finally got that saddle, it was just so nice to ride around on these creatures as well. And then I could progress onto things like Rexes and Spinos, because allos weren't a thing at this time whatsoever. I think they're a 2016 addition to Arc, and the Carno really did rule the roost, and I still think it's quite high up there for me, and actually for me, superior to the allo. In number 2 we've got the Argentavis, and this is again gone through TLC with a model update and a whole host of new features. Not sure if I actually did have the Smithy as a saddle when it first released. I think the Castoroides was the first one to gain that, but maybe it gained it at the same time or at a later date when the TLC stuff happened. And I'm not sure if it had all the weight reduction, but it definitely had a very high weight stat, and it could pick up a huge amount of tames, much more than something like a Pteranodon, and it really was just an upgraded Pteranodon in my eyes. More stamina, more weight, and because you could crank the speed on these things, because movement speed on flies was still a thing. Really do wish that that was still a thing that you could do, because I just loved it so much. And I still, obviously, every time I'm playing single player or if I'm running a server or something, I will always have flyer speed leveling on, and obviously player speed leveling now if I'm doing ASA, which actually I do little of. I mainly stick to Survival Evolved, because I'm just enjoying it a lot more right now, and I am playing through Gen 1, and you can't really do that on Survival Ascended at the moment. I'm playing through it again, obviously. I have done Gen 1 before, and the RG really just was the kind of gateway to the best fire on the map, and that's why the Quetzal really didn't land too much for me, because I felt the RG did everything it needed to do for me, and I didn't need something like the Quetzal. Yes, the Skybase was very cool and inventive, but maybe not quite what I wanted. And in number 1 we've got the Giga, because this is, in my opinion, really deserving of this spot. It is just a go-to Arc creature for me, or at least it was back in the day. Now I kind of tend to stick to the Crocodonsaurus, and come on, this thing still released in 2015, yes, later on in the year, and it was an absolute monster. It was just so fun to get. The Rex and the Spino sort of seemed a bit obsolete with a creature like this. It was so massive, and it might have done the bleed ability back then, but I'm not sure. The wild ones, obviously, because the tame ones had no bleed ability whatsoever. And obviously the wild ones were a lot more powerful than once you got the tame ones, but you didn't really notice that at the time. You would just absolutely decimate all the creatures in the area, and that rage buff was actually a really cool, nice, neat ability that you'd be crediting a lot of the time. At least I was. I thought that was a very cool addition, and it really made the Giga more immersive as a creature, where now it just kind of seems to be an annoyance. And it really didn't feel like its stamina was too awful back in the day. I never really encountered that all too much. I'm not sure if it was reduced or something like that, or just simply a placebo on my part, but I really do find that with stats like stamina and weights, they always felt higher back in the day. I'm not really sure why though. But anyway, that is the end of today's video. I really hope that you all have enjoyed, as I've definitely enjoyed making this one. As always, comment down below what is the best early or OG Arc Tame to you, and if you didn't agree with this list, then put your 10 down below in the comments, obviously not in the description, and I'll see you later.